I think I understand the safety protocols and the safety mentality very, very well. And these guys broke the rules.
Stockton Rush bought expired carbon fiber from Boeing at a discount. The material was too old for airplanes, but he used it anyway. He built a sub with a $30 video game controller. The viewport was rated for 300 meters, but he dove to 3,800. Between 2021 and 2022, there were 118 equipment failures. The front dome fell off once. Everyone who looked closely saw death coming, but Stockton Rush called them cowards. He said the industry was obscenely safe. 3 years later, his confidence killed him, and 4 others. In 2013, Stockton Rush made a bold move that shocked the deep-sea exploration world. While most submersibles relied on solid, proven materials like titanium or steel, Rush had a different vision. He decided to build the Titan using a mix of carbon fiber and titanium, something no one had ever tried at this scale. The result was the first privately owned deep-sea submersible of its kind. Weighing 23,000 pounds, Titan had titanium domes at both ends, but its main hull was made from carbon fiber-reinforced plastic. The company behind this risky design, Spencer Composites, was given just 6 weeks to deliver the hull. Brian Spencer, the CEO, later admitted they were handed basic pressure targets and a tight deadline, and told to figure the rest out. Experts in the field immediately sounded the alarm. Carbon fiber and titanium don't behave the same way under pressure. At 13,000 feet below sea level, where the Titanic rests, the pressure is nearly 400 times that of the surface. That's far beyond what traditional submarines are designed to endure. Most Navy subs only go down to about 2,000 or 3,000 feet. But Rush didn't stop with unconventional materials. He also rejected conventional hiring. Instead of bringing in experienced submarine veterans, he proudly recruited young college graduates. He said he didn't want 50-year-old white guys with Navy backgrounds. He wanted fresh faces, people he could train himself using his own methods. He believed they'd be more open to his approach, which borrowed safety ideas from aerospace and relied on simple systems, including a video game controller for steering. To many in the industry, this was reckless. Former Navy officers and deep-sea experts criticized this strategy as dangerously naive. Submarine operations aren't a game, they warned. It takes years, sometimes decades, of experience to know how to manage underwater emergencies and structural failures. But to Rush, innovation meant rewriting the rules, even if it meant ignoring the people who wrote them in the first place. And the deeper you dig into how the Titan was built, the more troubling it gets. Just before a planned dive in May 2023, journalist Arnie Weissman recalled something Rush casually mentioned that still haunts him. Rush said the carbon fiber used in the Titan had been bought at a big discount from Boeing. Why was it cheap? Because it was past its expiration date. The material had aged out of eligibility for use in airplanes. Rush brushed off concerns about it, saying shelf life standards were too strict anyway. But Boeing later denied ever selling any such material to OceanGate and distanced itself from the project. OceanGate had claimed their sub was developed in collaboration with Boeing, but that too was strongly disputed by the aerospace company. So where exactly did this expired carbon fiber come from? And how was it allowed to be used in something meant to dive 12,000 feet beneath the surface? That's where the most shocking part of the story comes in. Rush had made a clear decision not to seek industry-standard safety certifications. He believed regulations were holding back innovation. In an interview, he called the sub-industry obscenely safe, pointing out that there hadn't been a major injury in decades. He argued that all the red tape made it impossible to try anything new. He was especially critical of the Passenger Vessel Safety Act of 1993, which he claimed over-prioritized passenger safety. So instead of meeting U.S. safety rules, he took advantage of loopholes by operating in international waters. far from regulatory oversight. That way, Ocean Gate could avoid inspections and hull testing that might have flagged the sub's weak points. One of those weak points was the viewport, the thick acrylic window passengers used to see the outside world. That viewport turned out to be a critical flaw. It was built to handle pressure at 1,300 meters deep. But Titan was regularly diving to 3,800 meters, nearly 3 times deeper. At that depth, the ocean crushes with around 6,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. That's like stacking 50 jumbo jets on a square meter of the sub's surface. To make things worse, the viewport was unusually large, 21 inches across. That meant even more pressure focused on a single vulnerable spot. In 2019, Carl Stanley, a seasoned submersible expert and friend of Stockton Rush, went on a dive in the Titan off the coast of the Bahamas. As they descended deeper into the ocean, something disturbing happened. Stanley began hearing loud cracking and popping sounds echoing through the hull. He instantly recognized the noises as a sign of serious structural problems. To him, it sounded like the carbon fiber was starting to fail. After the dive, Stanley didn't stay silent. He fired off emails to Rush, warning him that what he heard wasn't just minor creaking, it was a real red flag. He even wrote that customers would likely panic if they heard those same terrifying sounds 2 miles under the sea. But despite his clear warnings and concern, Rush brushed it off and continued diving with paying passengers. And this wasn't the first time Rush had ignored warnings. Back in 2018, a group of the world's leading submarine engineers, members of the Marine Technology Society, sent a unanimous letter to him. These were experts with over 60 years of combined experience. They warned that the Titan's experimental design was risky and could lead to catastrophic consequences. One of their main concerns was that OceanGate refused to follow DNV-GL safety standards, which are considered the gold standard in the industry. While OceanGate claimed their sub met or exceeded those benchmarks, the experts couldn't find any proof of it. Their letter made it clear, this wasn't about slowing down innovation. It was about preventing disaster. Also in 2018, another serious voice tried to raise the alarm. David Lockridge, a Scottish engineer and submarine pilot, was hired by OceanGate in 2015 to inspect and maintain safety. But what he found worried him deeply. He discovered that the Titan hadn't gone through crucial, non-destructive tests on its carbon fiber hull. He flagged concerns about the strength of the viewport and whether it could handle the pressure at Titanic depths. When he pushed back and filed a complaint, he was fired. OceanGate didn't just let him go. They sued him for breach of contract and spilling company secrets. He filed his own whistleblower complaint, and the legal battle was settled later that year. But his firing meant the only person inside the company who could truly push for safety was now gone. The situation kept getting worse. According to the U.S. Coast Guard, between 2021 and 2022, there were 118 documented equipment failures during Titan's commercial operations. That number is staggering. Among the worst problems? The front dome of the sub fell off during recovery, which could have caused a massive disaster. In another trip, passengers were stuck underwater for 27 straight hours because several systems failed at once. There were also instances where the sub lost battery power mid-dive, failed to release ballast weights, and even partially sank while docked. In 2019, the hull was struck by lightning and later developed cracks that showed signs of fatigue. Still, the sub was patched up and sent back out. There was never any third-party testing. Important parts were left outside in the cold for months. Each of those 118 failures was a warning, but none of them stopped operations. Rush, despite all these problems, doubled down on his own ideas. He believed his acoustic sensor system would alert the crew before anything truly bad happened. He trusted this system more than proven safety tests. Instead of listening to engineers or following international standards like DNVGL, Rush insisted those rules were outdated and slowed down innovation. In blog posts, OceanGate even said certifications wouldn't guarantee safety because innovation can't always fit within existing rules. Rush saw regulations as roadblocks, not safeguards. He believed the industry was too safe and that it needed risk to push boundaries. They boarded the submersible with a mix of excitement and nerves. 5 people, each from a different world, each drawn by the same lure, seeing the Titanic with their own eyes. Stockton Rush, the 61-year-old CEO of OceanGate, was not just the pilot, but the man behind the design of the Titan itself. Beside him sat Hamish Harding, 58, a British billionaire who once flew into space and circled the globe faster than anyone alive. Then came Paul-Henri Nargeolet, 77, a legend among Titanic explorers, having led more than 35 missions to the wreck. The youngest, Suleiman Dawood, just 19, was there with his father, Shahzada, a Pakistani-British businessman. Suleiman's mother had given up her spot, so her son could have the experience instead. This wasn't a regular tour. It was a deep-sea expedition priced at $250,000 per seat. OceanGate didn't call them passengers. They were mission specialists. The company claimed it was a research mission, not a tourist trip. They promised something only a handful of people on Earth would ever witness. According to Stockton Rush, some people even mortgaged their homes to afford it. For others, the money was pocket change. But whether rich or risky, everyone bought into the dream. And for OceanGate, each trip brought in over $1 million. That revenue was crucial. The company wasn't backed by big investors. It ran on the thrill of adventure and the wallets of the brave. On June 18, 2023, the Titan prepared for its dive. It was a Sunday morning. The mothership, Polar Prince, had reached the Titanic's site around 5:15 a.m. At 8:30, the 5 crew members entered the sub. The vessel was attached to a floating platform called Lars. By 8:55, the platform was vented and started to sink. Just before 9:20, Titan separated and began its descent, headed 13,000 feet down into the Atlantic. Hamish Harding had posted days before, saying harsh winter storms had delayed their plans. But now, the sea was calm. The weather window had finally opened. His message warned this might be the only manned dive to the Titanic that year. No one guessed it would be the last. From the surface, Wendy Rush kept in contact. She was Stockton's wife and served as the mission's main communicator. Everything looked routine in those first moments. There was no sign of what was coming. But beneath the water, the Titan was far from a typical submarine. Its steering system relied on a $30 wireless game controller, just a modified Logitech F7 and 10. Stockton had proudly shown it off in interviews. A toy, essentially, guiding a 23,000-pound submersible into one of the most dangerous parts of the ocean. There was no backup. If the controller failed, they were stuck. There was no GPS either. Once underwater, Titan relied on acoustic signals and text messages to stay in touch with the surface. It was being navigated like an elevator, with one main button. Experts were horrified. Military and research submarines use layered safety systems, hardwired backups, and redundancies. Titan had none of that. The controller wasn't just a gimmick. It was a lifeline that could be broken by a battery dying or interference in the signal. The vessel's whole design was built around simplification and cost-cutting, not survival. Then there was the hatch. Once the dive began, the crew inside couldn't get out. The hatch had to be bolted shut from the outside before descent. Even if the sub made it back to the surface, they'd be trapped inside until someone opened it for them, That's how tightly it was sealed. No escape handle, no emergency exit. If the systems failed, the crew would be stuck in a capsule the size of a van, sitting on the floor with barely enough space to stretch. The inside measured just over 6 meters by 2.8 meters. That tight space, combined with the sealed door, turned Titan into a metal coffin. Other deep-sea vehicles are designed with emergency float systems or mechanisms to open from within. Titan had none. Rescue would always be needed. But deep in the Atlantic, time and response are luxuries. And when communication from Titan stopped shortly after its descent, panic started to build. At 9:18 a.m. on June 18, 2023, the Titan submersible released from its launch platform in the North Atlantic. It began a journey that would last only 96 minutes. The team on the surface, aboard the Polar Prince, was in regular contact with the 5 men inside. Every 15 minutes, text messages were sent. Every few seconds, the Titan responded with acoustic pings. The crew asked about depth, weight balance, and whether the onboard display still showed the Titanic. Everything seemed normal. Wendy Rush, who was helping manage communications, spoke to her husband Stockton Rush and the others as they dropped deeper into the dark sea. Nothing in those early messages showed panic or fear. But beneath the calm words, the pressure outside the sub was increasing fast. Titan was entering a danger zone where its structure would face the full force of the deep ocean. And no one knew this descent was becoming deadly. By 10:16 a.m., Titan had reached 2,274 meters, over 7,400 feet deep. That's 230 times more pressure than at sea level. It was then that the crew sent what would be their final message. All good here. On the surface, it seemed reassuring. But what they didn't realize was that their vessel may already have been breaking apart. Later investigations revealed that the carbon fiber hull was already weakened from previous dives. Signs of failure had likely started, but the crew didn't have the tools to detect it. They were relying on visual systems, not sensors that could show real-time stress. And because it's normal for signals to cut in and out underwater, no one thought anything was wrong. But that calm message, sent just after the 1-hour mark, would be their last. Within half an hour, all 5 men would be gone. At 10:25 a.m., Titan sent another update. They were now southeast of the Titanic's bow at a depth of around 2,600 meters. That placed them right in the area of the famous wreck. They had followed their intended route and were nearing their target depth of 3,800 meters. But at that point, the outside pressure was crushing, about 38,000 pounds per square foot. The vessel's structure was being pushed to its limit. It was an experimental design that had never passed strict testing. Still, no alarm was raised, no warning sounded. The message showed that everything was going according to plan. But in truth, the stress on the hull was rising fast. At that depth, even the smallest flaw could cause disaster. And the Titan had more than one flaw hidden in its carbon shell. Then came the final moment. At exactly 10:47:27 a.m., Titan sent a short message. Dropped 2 WTs. They had released 2 35-pound weights. In most dives, this would be done to begin the return to the surface. But here, it likely meant something had gone wrong. Perhaps they felt the sub was sinking too fast. Maybe they heard strange sounds. Either way, it was a clear sign of emergency. Just 6 seconds after that message, the last acoustic ping was received. Titan was still at 3,346 meters, almost 11,000 feet deep. Pressure at that level is beyond imagination, 334 times that of the surface. According to experts, the implosion happened in less than 1 millisecond. The crew never had time to react. The vessel collapsed inward so fast that death would have been instant. That tiny message, dropped 2 WTs, was the last thing anyone would ever hear from them. The search for the Titan submersible quickly turned into one of the largest and most complex maritime rescue missions in modern history. It stretched across the North Atlantic, over an area even bigger than the entire state of Connecticut. The focus was 900 nautical miles off Cape Cod, about 400 miles southeast of Newfoundland. That location made everything harder. The ocean was deep, the waters were cold, and every piece of rescue equipment had to be shipped in from far away. The U.S. Coast Guard led the mission, but they weren't alone. Canada, France, and several other countries joined in, throwing everything they had at it. By June 21st, 5 vessels were already scanning the area, and 5 more were expected to arrive within 2 days. The U.S. Navy sent in deep-sea salvage systems, while Canada used P-3 Orion aircraft with sonar to scan below. France contributed experts familiar with Titanic expeditions. The mission involved remotely operated vehicles that could reach as far down as 13,000 feet. Hundreds of people worked around the clock. Each day cost millions. No one held back. Then something strange happened. On June 20th, Canadian aircraft picked up underwater sounds, banging noises that came in patterns. People hoped they were distress signals, maybe even SOS. They came every 30 minutes, and when extra sonar was deployed hours later, the banging continued. News spread like wildfire. The idea that the crew might still be alive gave families hope. The U.S. Coast Guard confirmed the sounds and even moved some search vessels to that spot. Carl Hartsfield, from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, warned people not to jump to conclusions. Underwater sounds are complicated. They bounce, echo, twist. They can come from almost anything. But media outlets ran with it. Some even claimed the banging matched SOS codes. In reality, nothing found in that area gave any signs of life. Experts later said the noises were natural. Maybe they came from shifting debris on the Titanic wreck, maybe from distant ships. Whatever the case, they weren't from the Titan. The whole episode wasted time, money, and, more than anything, people's hope. But the most shocking part of the story wasn't what was heard. It was what had already been known. The U.S. Navy had actually picked up signs of an implosion on the morning the Titan disappeared, Sunday, June 18th. Yet the public was told a very different story. Officials kept saying the submersible had 96 hours of oxygen. They mentioned it in every press conference. They urged people to stay hopeful. They said this was still a rescue mission, not a recovery. Captain Jamie Frederick reminded reporters that time was ticking, but not out. Rear Admiral John Mauger told them the wreck site was noisy and confusing. It was all part of the strategy. The Navy's detection system was classified. They didn't want to reveal it, so the world kept watching, waiting, believing there might be a chance. Media channels tracked the countdown, families clung to hope, and crews searched waters they already suspected held only wreckage. It was a painful deception, meant to protect secrets, but it left loved ones in agony for 4 days. On June 22nd, the truth finally surfaced. Literally, a remotely operated vehicle discovered debris on the ocean floor. It was just 500 meters from the Titanic's bow. The pieces weren't scattered like trash. They told a clear story. The Titan had suffered a catastrophic implosion. The U.S. Coast Guard confirmed it. The carbon fiber hull was gone. Only the titanium end caps and a few other parts survived. The sub's tail cone was still intact, resting on the seafloor. That was all they needed to end the search. The vessel had likely imploded during its descent, not while sitting still. The coordinates 41-4404N, 49-56 Sit 30WI marked the exact spot where the Titan was lost. The false hope vanished. The race against time narrative dissolved. What the Navy had known quietly all along was now in full public view. The press stopped speculating. The families were finally told. But the answers came far too late to save anyone. What came next was both forensic and deeply human. The site became a mix of investigation and memorial. Recovery teams began the grim work of gathering what was left. The Coast Guard confirmed the collection of presumed human remains. Because of the immense pressure of the implosion, almost nothing of the bodies remained. But some personal items somehow survived. One of them was especially haunting, an intact pen found inside Stockton Rush's sand-covered sleeve. That pen, untouched by the crushing force that obliterated steel and bone, became a symbol, a reminder that even in the depths, tiny traces of humanity can remain. Recovery teams used ROVs to carefully map the site. Items like jewelry, torn clothing, and electronics were collected to help reconstruct the final moments. Ocean Gate was falling apart, long before the Titan ever dove. Behind the scenes, the company was running on fumes. They didn't even have enough money to pay back customers who wanted refunds. In fact, Stockton Rush, Ocean Gate's CEO, had to cover payroll from his own personal account just to keep things running. Between 2019 and 2023, their staff had been cut in half, shrinking from around 30 people to just 14 or 15. Amber Bay, who was with the company that whole time, admitted that Rush had to increase his investment just to make sure his team got paid. At one point in early 2023, things got so bad that employees were asked to delay their own salaries. Even Rush stopped taking a paycheck. The COVID pandemic had crushed their operations, and they never financially recovered. They were barely afloat, no money for safety upgrades, no backup funds, no refund pool, just debt, desperation, and a deep-sea deadline. But the most disturbing part? The money Ocean Gate did collect, especially the $250,000 that each tourist paid, wasn't going towards safety. It was being funneled straight into keeping the company alive. A single Titan trip brought in over $1 million. That money should have gone into research, upgrades, and testing. Instead, it was used to pay salaries, fuel the ship, and patch up the vessel just enough to keep things moving. That meant if they canceled even one trip over safety concerns, it could have pushed the company over the edge. So they didn't cancel. They kept diving. The pressure wasn't just from the ocean, it was from the bank account. The passengers weren't just explorers. They were unknowingly funding a risky experiment. And the company was trapped in a cycle where every decision was tilted toward survival, not safety. It gets worse. Rush had personally patented the acoustic monitoring system he believed would save lives. It was designed to detect cracks and stress in the hull. If something went wrong, the idea was that the sensors would hear it, and the dive could be aborted in time. Rush was so confident in the system that he treated it like proof the sub was safe. In fact, when another expert heard cracking sounds in 2019 and warned him, Rush brushed it off, said it was just valuable data for his system. No further testing. No structural inspection, just blind trust in a machine that had never been properly vetted. And when the Titan imploded, the system gave no warning at all. Nothing. The passenger's final message about dropping weights came too late. Rush's faith in his own invention, combined with his financial investment in it, replaced proven safety protocols. And it cost 5 people their lives. Even after previous hull failures, Ocean Gate never put proper testing procedures in place. The Titan's original carbon fiber hull had been damaged by lightning and showed visible signs of fatigue as early as 2019. It was replaced in 2020. But after that, there was no schedule for regular checks, no stress testing, no non-destructive evaluations, even after more than 20 deep dives. Experts warned that each dive was like bending a paperclip. Do it enough, and it snaps. But the company ignored it. One professor compared it to splitting wood along the grain. That's how carbon fiber behaves under repeated pressure. It doesn't fail instantly. It weakens slowly, until one day it breaks. OceanGate chose to skip industry-standard safety protocols to cut costs, and they treated the paying public like test pilots in an unfinished prototype. Then came the disaster. Days after the Titan's implosion, OceanGate went dark. On July 6, 2023, they posted a quiet, one-line statement on their website. All operations suspended. No explanation. No future plans. Just silence. They'd spent 14 years chasing the dream of deep-sea tourism. In a matter of days, it was over. The company was already under intense scrutiny. With lawsuits looming, public trust shattered, and bodies still being recovered, they had no choice. Deposits from customers were left hanging. There was no money left to return. Investigators moved in. And Rush's dream of becoming a pioneer in extreme tourism ended not just in tragedy, but in total collapse. The implosion didn't just destroy the Titan. It destroyed the entire company. That's when the conspiracies started. Within days, the internet lit up with theories. Wild, hateful, and completely untrue. One of the most viral ones blamed the Rothschilds. Conspiracy theorists claimed that David de Rothschild had served on OceanGate's board a decade earlier, and that the family orchestrated the tragedy to cover up hidden secrets about the original Titanic. The theory quickly turned anti-Semitic. They claimed that the Rothschilds had also sunk the Titanic in 1912 to eliminate financial rivals, opposed to the creation of the Federal Reserve. Now, supposedly, the Titan was going to uncover that evidence, so it was sabotaged. These absurd ideas flooded social media. Videos on TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter got hundreds of thousands of views. Prominent far-right figures like Stu Peters gave these lies a megaphone. And many people believed it. Some even said the Titanic disaster itself had been planned. They claimed it wasn't an iceberg that caused the sinking, but a plot. That powerful bankers had targeted men like John Jacob Astor and Benjamin Guggenheim, killing them to push through the U.S. Federal Reserve Act. Then they stretched the theory to 2023, saying the Titan was destroyed because it was about to find evidence hidden on the wreck. One theorist even joked that an iceberg can't cut through hardened steel, echoing lines used in 9/11 conspiracies. They pointed to new international treaties about the Titanic wreck and claimed it was all part of a cover-up. It didn't matter that the science, the facts, or the people involved said otherwise. The lies sounded dramatic, and people wanted to believe. The most viral part? The fact that Wendy Rush, Stockton's wife, was descended from Titanic victims. Her great-great-grandparents, Isidore and Ida Strauss, had died in the 1912 sinking. That connection was real, but conspiracy theorists twisted it into something grotesque. They claimed her role at OceanGate proved the whole thing was scripted. Some said it was proof the same families were pulling the strings for over a century. Others said it was revenge or fate, or a hidden bloodline ritual. They ignored the fact that Wendy Rush was a real employee who had gone on multiple successful dives. They ignored that OceanGate's problems were public, documented, and entirely preventable. They turned a personal family tragedy into bait for internet engagement and a platform for anti-Semitic hate speech.